Let me call upon Pooja Elangbam, who is from the Indian Administrative Service, a young aspiring civil servant who is from Manipur. I think as a young person sitting in this panel, with all the diverse, inputs of everybody, how do you see, yourself as a young aspiring person, looking at diversity at this moment, and what do you think is the way forward?
Namaskar. Good afternoon. I thank National Commission for Women for inviting me to speak on this very relevant issue. Starting off with my personal experience, I was 11 years old when I went to boarding school in North India. And I still remember my first day there. I was scared and I was surrounded by a group of young kids. And they were asking me, which country are you from? And, are you a princess of that country? So I had to explain to them that I was from Manipur. So there was one instance in which I realized I was different and I was perceived as different when I moved out of the Northeast. Another is when I went to St. Stephen's College for my college, and I was 18 years old then, and I also encountered a lot of people on the streets calling me Chinky, Chinese. And even when I performed well in my classes, when I topped my classes, even the professors were surprised that how can a person from the Northeast do so well? So that kind of subtle awestruck that how can a person perform so well, that kind of incidents I faced. Another one is just yesterday I was having dinner with my friends, and it was 8 o'clock and my mother called me up, and I am an IS officer now. I just finished conducting the state legislative assembly elections in Manipur as a returning officer. I'm 28 years old, and still my mother is calling me at 8 p.m. and telling me, are you sure you are safe in Delhi out at night? So even now, I still face this, and I'm sure so many of us, especially the students and young people gathered here today, have faced similar situation. And so, I just want everyone to understand that race is a social construct, just the way gender is a social construct. And racialization is a process by which, this race is brought into existence through signifiers such as the color of our skin, our features, and sometimes by our cultural markers. And the predominant idea of race which we have now came into being in the 18th and 19th century during the period of imperialism and colonization. So, for example, in India, we have the British coming up with the idea of the so-called martial races. Especially after the revolt of 1857, because they wanted to make certain groups more loyal to them. So that is how they came up with these ideas. So it is something which has continued till now, and I think we need to really address it, and I think this is a really important forum for everyone to come together, people from different organizations and departments and all the students gathered here today. I think education is one of the foremost areas where we can actually change this. My nephew Maverick, he was telling me about how in his school, in his class, they are allotted a state, and throughout the course of the year, they learn various aspects of the state of our country. So they learn about the cuisines, they learn about the biodiversity, they learn about religion and culture. So through the course of a year, they become so intimate with that state and they learn so much about it that I think that will last for a lifetime, that kind of understanding. And maybe when they grow up, they will actually travel to that state, or they will travel to that state with their families. And like Mrs. Rekha Sharma has suggested, actually even have exchanges as part of our curriculum. So if our education system and our curriculum reflects the diversity that is India, I think to instill that kind of sensitization from an early age is very important. I also think that literature is how we connect, stories is how we connect to each other. And instead of just hitting with cold hard facts, if we incorporate literature of different parts of the country in our syllabus. For example, we read a lot of American in English authors in our syllabus while growing up. So, I remember asking my mother to give me marshmallows and scones, and my mom, told me that this does not exist in our country, but just because I read about it in our books, I always wanted to eat those items. So, if we actually incorporate these stories, a person growing up in Kerala, if they read about, Lai Harauba or about Iromba of the north, of Manipur, or a person in Punjab reading about, the Ladakh and, Nagaland, if we can understand this from an early age, I think it will bring us all much closer to each other. So I think education is very important in this factor. Another aspect, I think, is representation. Representation in screens, in cinemas, in media, in politics, in administration. So, as a young person growing up, I saw, Sir Robin Hibu working with the Northeast people, actually addressing the issues faced by people of the Northeast. So it was very heartening to me. And I also wanted to be in a position where I can help other people. So, and here I am. So I felt that, representation on screens, taking the example of the US, the phenomena of the Black Panther, movie is also because there was suddenly, after a very long time, there was a black superhero, and people all over the world felt that they, relate to it, a person who looked like them. So as, that's why I think the K-wave or the Korean wave actually hit the Northeast in the early 2000s, just before it hit the rest of the world. Because, people from the Northeast could look to these people on screens and felt that they look like us and they represent, so many of our stories. So I think that's why people really love the Korean dramas and Korean movies. And I think we need to have a lot more representation in our cinemas, in our, media from the Northeast as well, because the more we see, through social media or through media, that's when they become familiar to us and we become familiar, to other parts of the country. So I think that is also another aspect in which we can look at. Another, I think, is also in terms of, recruitment, even in government services and even in corporate jobs. We need to have much more diversity, and we need to have this diversity criteria and standards in hiring and recruiting people. This is prevalent in, I think, almost all the developed countries, where they actually include this while hiring people. So I think it's very important, because in a study done in the US, it was found that when black and white people with the same qualifications, when they applied for a job, the whites got a much higher callback. I don't know if a similar study has been done in India yet, but I feel that it's quite likely that people with mainstream looks and mainstream names with the same qualification as people, say from the Northeast, I think the mainstream person, looking person, or with the mainstream name is likely to get a call back. So I think these are the ways in which we can look at, we can see that now gender sensitization courses have become mainstream. I think the National Commission for Women has taken a big step in, incorporating this in many organizations and making it a, phenomena and a movement and normalizing it. So I think in the same way, we can have racial diversity sensitization courses, for many organizations, for NGOs, for the police, especially the police, because they are the interface dealing with people on the ground. So I think there's a lot which can be done, and there's a lot that we need to do, but the fact that all of us are gathered here today and we are present and we are willing to have this discourse and this conversation, I think this is the right step in making India's diversity its strength. Thank you. Jai Hind.